There's definitely Detroit time, and then there's Oakland County time.
Brian, I went ahead and went live with Real Fridays here on Real Friday just to stay consistent with our 12:30 start time. I know Greg Sher is having technical difficulties trying to turn on his webcam. I don't even know. Do they still call them webcams? His camera on his laptop. But Greg is having here. Let me.
You can hear me though, so I mean, I'm not much to look at, so this might be better. This could be an enhancement.
Dude, I don't understand.
Greg's got a face for radio. Greg's got a face for radio. It's perfect.
Your dad.
Greg's confused. He thought he was on Kelleher's radio show.
Yeah, I don't ever want to show up there because I'm afraid I'll get egged or I'll get, someone will have toilet paper.
By the way, we're live.
All my CDs.
So yeah, we are live, Greg, and you really can't figure out your. This is literally how it's gonna go. This is perfect. Good deal. We got Jeremy Potter from Detroit.
No
draft. Way. Detroit is draft city. For the NFL draft. Greg Sher is having just a difficult time getting in, but I'm gonna keep monitoring him while we just go ahead and go with the program. Actually, this is the first time that we've had Jay Promisco from Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and this is Real Fridays, Jay. Certainly, Brian's been on before, Greg's been on before, and what we do here is we have real talk regarding housing, mortgage, and real estate. We tend to put people, on the hot seat, and I promise you that I will completely disregard that my paycheck comes from you now that I'm with Sierra Pacific. In any questions that we that we cover here. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like a real discussion is mandatory given everything that's going on, and little besides behind the scenes action. Before we went on stage, Clayton was like, "Hey, can you make sure that you only offend half the room, not the whole room?" So, because I'm known for being pretty blunt and honest, and so anyhow, thank you for having me on.
No, of course. And Greg, can you hear us? Are you actually connected here, even though we cannot see you?
Yeah, it's all good. I'm not much to look at. We can just do this until I figure it out. So pretend like you can see me, okay? And I'll keep doing this.
I just
just disappeared.
I don't think Greg is.
Caller, where are you calling from?
I don't think Greg is wearing any clothes. I think that's the reason why he's not. He decided
no pants Friday. I heard.
It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for the audience to imagine another white guy. So just everybody out there, just imagine another white mortgage guy.
Okay? Exactly.
I like this comment from LinkedIn, or someone is saying it's on. He just has a cover over it. That is what it looks like.
Help desk.
Jay is Irish and Italian, so you can be the judge as to whether or not that's another white guy. But so
it's Sicilian. It's not even Italian. So I feel like I have a little bit more street cred than your average. But anyhow.
So this is sort of there we go.
I give up. I was trying to go high definition, but you know what? The hell with it.
You got a future in IT support, Greg.
Now you've muted yourself, Greg. Greg, you are. Is this how you begin your board meetings at NFM? So we did. I think Jeremy Potter won the bet that you were actually dressed. So it's good to see you fully clothed and fully engaged here with Real Fridays.
Great to be here.
So this is actually kind of interesting because we all six of us were actually at the HousingWire conference, the gathering. I know, Greg, you've been very vocal, online and as to the success of the conference. So I wouldn't mind hearing from Brian and Jay, and of course Brock and Jeremy, with you to follow, just to in the days after the gathering. What have your any revelations, any thoughts, any follow up from the conference? Anyone?
Yeah, maybe I'll get number one. HousingWire knocked it out of the park, and I've been over my many years going to MBA and advocacy conferences and the masterminds. The HousingWire really stuck out to me as, here's how I start offending people, probably the single most active advocacy group out there, and they're a publication. So they're actually, in my view, allowing discussions to happen amongst people that are on the phone, other industry leaders versus some of the other trade groups that are maybe want to talk about one thing instead of what's important, which is how to drive the industry forward. So I was overly impressed on the organization around it. I was impressed with the people that presented. And by the way, it was a reminder of how this industry is a personal business. It's the interactions in and around cocktail hour and between the sessions and at breakfast and at dinner, how important that part is, more so than some of the song and dance on stage. So I left energetic. I felt like there was a few industry players that are understanding what we're actually trying to do. And so, yeah, 2 thumbs up from Clayton's crew.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway, man?
Yeah, I'll piggyback. I posted this morning. It's been pretty inspiring just to see everyone, people that were in attendance sharing their thoughts, very similar and in line, Jay, with what you described. And going into the conference, I thought I would try something different. And I think those of us that are on this line that are, not in the lender seat today, but maybe are in a lender seat that is in a B2B lender seat, we've tended to use these conferences to cram our calendars with back-to-back meetings. And I went into this one and intentionally really didn't schedule one single, I'll take that back. I had a breakfast and a lunch that I scheduled. Other than that, I left it wide open, and I felt like I understood. I felt the vibe of the conference much better than being stuck in a corner in a conference room doing back-to-back meetings. And so when I compare like the output coming off of a traditional conference where I would do a lot of meetings versus this one, I actually had the same kind of output in terms of prospective clients that we're bringing into the pipeline, maybe moving forward some prospects through the pipeline, and even getting a deal done at the conference. And so having done that, I just left with a lot of energy around and I'm encouraged for our industry, for the people that were there. It's a tough market, but heads were up. People were positive and looking for and finding ways to win, which is exciting to me. And that's not to say that it's all roses and rainbows, but there is a sense of encouragement that I'll take away from that conference in terms of the mindset.
Yeah, Bill Emerson at Rocket used to say.
What about you, Jeremy? Actually, you were extremely busy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of what Emerson used to say was you don't actually need to immediately have the solution. Sometimes you just need the bartender to look at you and know that they got you. You're standing you're anxious. You're like, is it my turn? Am I going to get served? And what I mean here is that moment you're talking about where you get to a conference like this, you're talking to those people and you realize like, okay, it's not going to happen right now, but there's enough people saying like, hey, we're headed in this direction. This is happening. We're going to get this and this as far as change goes. I mean, one of the things I'm always looking for is like, who's investing in real change? And where is that investment focused? And one of the biggest things I heard from CEOs on stage, and I think HousingWire did a pretty good job comparatively to Jay's point to other conferences, HousingWire did a good job getting CEOs on stage, hear directly from the CEOs of these businesses and executive leaders of these businesses. And what I heard was you have a critical decision to make. You have limited resources. Are you investing in technology that goes directly to your team? Or are you investing in technology that goes directly to the consumer? And if you're doing both, how are you juggling that investment? And that was the key question. If I was advising a leader or boards based on what I heard at HousingWire, it would be that. How are you going to direct those investments We heard, I think Frank Martel from Loan Depot say life cycle management. I'm automating the entire life cycle of home ownership. That's where our investment is going. I heard another CEO say, what's my durable advantage? What's my durable advantage that I have? I'm going to invest in that. And I think thinking that way is pretty good. The other thing I took away, I think these industries are crashing together. I've been saying it on this weekly thing for months now, and I'm just going to keep saying it because mortgage, real estate, and title is becoming one experience digitally. And behind the scenes, we're going to still do some of the things to get there. I think it's going to take a while to get there, but I'm more convinced than ever that this is all going to be an experience. That would be my takeaways.
All right, my turn. Yeah. No, echoing what everyone said, but a couple different things from my side was, and I guess what Potter was just saying with the different conferences for the different sections of the industry, or arguably different industries between real estate and mortgage. And I would almost consider prop tech separate. There's like these tech oriented VC conferences that I've always gone to when I was at Rocket looking at stuff, and at EasyKnock as one of those companies. So it was amazing for me. It's probably the best conference I've been to, period, in this industry, because I got to see all those groups at once. I usually have to go to 3-4 different conferences to see all the people I saw at this one. So in terms of that, my network, everyone I wanted to talk to, with the exception of Michael Kelleher, he couldn't make it. Everyone I wanted to talk to was at the conference. So that was just on the face of it great. But yeah, I have a shared note file with a bunch of different people that were at the conference, that were lining up the different vernacular and different phrasing all the different CEOs were using. From Frank to Varun to a bunch of the other ones that were up there with different angles. And so it was cool to dissect point by point what every lender is thinking, what every CEO at that lender is thinking. You could put them, directly head to head as you listen to one 2 minutes before the other one. So I think it was cool in that respect. And it was great in terms of collaboration for us. We partner with the mortgage and real estate industry, kind of connecting the two. So we got to see a lot of other pieces that we could bring into our platform, whether it's first time home buyer products like Crib Equity, obviously you guys know Sky, or Open Door and Zavvy with some of their alt home ownership models and home selling models. So we got to just get in front of a lot of people for NewsDip.
Greg, since while we have you on, go ahead. What and of course you did. I'm wearing the all of us t-shirt that you spearheaded while there, and I think that was really both smart and very sort of organic in order to sort of drive people together around coming together between channels, wholesale and retail, and even, as Jeremy said, sort of unify the different segments of the business for the purposes of advancing home ownership. But what? So I give you a lot of kudos, Greg, for doing that. You've been really, really on the ball on many of your posts since the conference. What were your takeaways since that you really haven't shared yet on LinkedIn? Since the conference,
I thought the bourbon collection was incredible there. That was one of my main takeaways. A couple other takeaways. James Kleiman from the HousingWire is the managing editor. Somehow he has no case on his iPhone. I just don't understand people that walk around this earth with no case. And I question them all. And to a man, over the history of iPhones, I've never heard anybody say anything other than, why do I need one? My iPhone's never broken. How's that possible?
The confidence.
I mean, it's like, who walks around with an iPhone and no case? I don't even understand. How's that even a thing? That's like walking around naked. To me, Stan Middleman was the highlight for me.
Yeah.
It's a shame that he went on the last day, because the room was half of what it was for the conference. And he's the founder, I guess, the president, and all these. He's got like 9 titles at Freedom. And I had never heard him talk before. But look, man, he's like Stop letting the LOs control what you do. Stop let LOs dictating your decisions. Stop with bad math. Just get back to making money on every loan that you do. Focus on that instead of thinking that you can outrun poor revenues by throwing more loans at a broken model. And that really, I was like, whoa, something to think about, right? Because to some degree, particularly at lenders that have P&Ls like we do, and not necessarily the retail model, which you can have sort of more rails and control over what you do and don't do. It was pretty profound for me to hear that, and a great reminder. And I shared it with our COO and president, and it sounded like he was talking, honestly, because he focuses on a lot of those things. Let's get back to making money, simplifying the process. I mean, at our company, we got 9 different CRMs because we sell autonomy, and we give everybody this idea that when they come to NFM, they can, if they have to use their own CRM, they do. So reel the control back in, and that includes compensation. He says we're paying people too much money. He ain't lying.
Yeah. It is an interesting tug of war between aiming to gain market share.
Elephant in the room.
Go ahead, Jay.
I was just saying that's the elephant room, and people were dancing around it. But and Greg, I have enterprise retail too, and so and wholesale is even worse. Wherein I can't. And Stan's a really, really, really smart guy. Like he's going to figure it out. He's always figured it out. But the complaints, your price is not good. And I'm like, no, my price is fine. Your compensation is too high, right? Those types of conversations that are being had. And Stan has just said, I'm not putting up with it. And he never put up with it in the history of his career. So, Stan's, guys like Stan, just to remind everybody on the phone or who's ever on the call, the only reason we do this is to make money. Like, it's not because I've got some, I'm a masochist and I like punishing myself every day. The whole reason we do this is because at some point there should be a return on your investment. And I think people have lost sight of that, specifically in the wholesale channel, where wholesale channel is like, just volume uber alles. It doesn't really matter if we make money today. We'll make it 3 years from now. Just stupid strategy. So,
So where do you think the and I think Sierra and certainly NFM as well have made substantial investments in technology, right, to kind of drive. Certainly at Sierra, there's a lot of vertical integration. I think you had said to somebody at the conference, Jay, that really our cost to manufacture alone is zero, right? And it's not truly zero, but the point is it's zero in the sense that we're not paying $100 a closed loan, $150 a closed loan. We certainly have supportive costs to the LOS that's native that Sierra has developed, but our cost to close loan is so low, substantially lower than the competition because of the investments in technology. Do you think the investments in technology is the real driver for additional, sort of basis points for a company's bottom line?
Was that aimed to Jay or is that open?
Look, we did an analysis of, or to Greg or to whoever. Anyway, I'll go Greg, and you're going to say the same exact thing that I'm going to say. But that we did an analysis of loans we did in 2004, 5, and 6, and then what our cost of manufacture is today. It was cheaper to do loans in 04 and 05 before any of the technology, by far. And when you think about all the different costs of manufacture, we have not just the technology spend, but then you have things like Work Number and automations and vendor spend. And then we have the nonsense between the agencies and sending loans back that we've had for 5 years. So you look at the total cost to originate today is way higher than it's ever been. And for me, the secret, because this consumer today is unbelievably smart. And so, unfortunately, you can have the best service in the world, best loan officer in the world, best technology in the world. It's kind of the Amazon effect or whatever you want to call it. And so we made a decision 7 years ago to say, look, I'm not a big fan of Encompass. I spent probably the worst 3 years of my career implementing Black Knights and Powers situation over at Stearns. Literally, it was the most painful thing I've ever done. And I didn't want to do that again. And so we built our own. And then I think the other secret around that, and I said it at the conference, like if you're a vendor providing a service, it better be doing one of two things: providing revenue or cutting your expense line. One or two things only. If you're not doing any of those things, you're not going to be in my vendor stack. And so the back to Stan's comments, Stan, he's right. I'm guilty of sin. All my loan officers said I needed this and I needed this and I needed this. And if I had all of these things, I'm going to do more loans. And guess what? That didn't happen. So the cost to manufacture a loan, you look at companies that have gotten it right, like a CMG or even Rocket hasn't figured it out. Their marketing spend kind of outweighs the technology spend that they have, but look like a CMG, they've got their cost control where it needs to be, and it's probably the cheapest manufacturing cost of anybody in the industry, and that's why they're able to price the way they are. And so those are my thoughts on cost. So,
Greg,
and by the way, we use an unfortunate term for vendors, and this is how you get offended. They're like leeches. Like if I have this loan and I have 10 people taking $50 off that loan every time I fund a loan, it's a problem. So.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons, in working with FinLocker, for instance, in the past, the narrative around cultivating sort of tomorrow's home buyer and focusing on sort of the credit incubation, helping consumers credit qualify rather than leaving them on, up to their own devices, helps make that ROI, I think, a lot more compelling, because you're actually seeing loans that you canceled or denied kind of recirculate back into the pipeline. And also you Brock, actually your company, I think, does a pretty effective job. And there's a number of use cases where, loans that otherwise would have gone to other mortgage companies, that would have been disrupted in that relationship with the realtor, would have gone somewhere else if it wasn't for the way in which you sort of keep track and manage that handoff. So I think your point, Jay, is right on, as far as it's got to either eliminate a cost or it's got to create revenue. Just pure hard costs, and some of them are hard to avoid, but pure hard costs are painful to see on a bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jay brings up a great point, but go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Brian.
Yeah,
You're up, man.
Nah, you haven't talked yet, man. I got to hear from you. You're wearing the brightest shirt, so you get the floor.
It's Ricky Fowler Friday. No, I was talking while you were screwing around with your camera, so go ahead.
Yeah, I've still not figured out the camera thing. I feel like I'm very, very blurry. I don't know. I'd have to restart my computer to get the camera working, and that will just annoy Dr. Rick Roque. And I don't want to ever upset a doctor because he's got, they all have our lives in their hands. It's true. I mean, Jay, what you say is really hits home because, we've had this race to add this and add this and add this and that. And you look at any loan and they're just, between, I don't want to name them all, right? Because I'm friends with most of the people that, that are helping out in all these different ways. But you end up looking up and you got $700, 20, 25 basis points, on the low end of third-party stuff that the LOs drag into the company. It adds confusion, not to mention from a compliance standpoint and a vendor management standpoint. Then you need more bodies over there. It's like, and then that's an additional cost. Like, none of this shit matters if you're not bringing consumers in, okay? None of it. And so we got to get back to like one focus, and that's getting to more consumers, adding more value, being educators, being more than just a loan officer, not getting on the call and just saying, what's the price of the house you want to buy? Like this whole business needs to get back to simplification. That's where we need to go. And there's just such a race to nowhere. I feel like we're all just trying to get to the moon with technology, and I doubt it's ever going to get there. I don't know. I'm cynical about it. And that's just the way it is. At the same time,
Greg,
yeah.
Greg, take us back a little bit, right? So you guys last year did what? Was it 5 or 6 billion? What was your
6 billion.
6 billion?
That's 16,000 loans.
So the question really is, obviously you were, and you've been with the company really since they were sub $1 billion, right? So
Yes.
The question is, naturally there's an evolution in things. The things that you did at $1 billion, you wouldn't do today because you don't have to, because you're at 6 billion, or you'll probably do 6.5 billion this year. The point is, how do you make that judgment call, or how did you make that judgment call around what you tolerate today or you wouldn't tolerate today that you felt you probably had to back then? Because it's always easy to say, oh, shoot, if you're at $1 billion, I would never do that. Well, you're sitting on 6 billion, right?
Yeah, I think the answer is simple, and Jay can relate to this, I'm sure. We're just able to be more selective now. When you're scrambling and the number 1 billion is a dream, you'll do anything you can to scratch and claw your way there. You're a one-person shop working from home. You do $1 million a month. Come on, man. You're a branch manager. So, everybody goes through that. And then you reach a point where you're like, you know what? I need to take larger shots. We need to create things that bring more responsible folks into the organization that otherwise have the caliber and pedigree to be able to open up their own company, but they don't want to take the risk. They want to use us as a fulfillment center. That's the dream. And that's kind of how we've been able to multiply. At the same time, though, that brings this other additional noise that we're having so much conversation about here. Hey, this is my vendor. I've got to have this and I have to have that. This is a no-brainer. And I'm not coming without having this. So you end up like flooding the system with more of this noise. So like on one hand, you're able to take bigger shots and justify them. On the other hand, you bring in a lot more static and a lot more noise because of all the demands. The higher caliber producers you bring in, the more high maintenance they are. It's not a secret.
Yeah,
Okay?
I know. When I was at CrossCountry, we supported 7 CRMs, and then we were in this process 7. And we were in the process of trying to kind of whittle that down and to try to drive kind of around a central CRM. But it's a constant tug of war between, what do you do to gain market share, and then what do you do to kind of be selective to support the efficiencies that are needed to drive your business. I mean, it's such an interesting, polemic. But
the other advantage though is that the larger you get, the more you can beat up your vendors, right? Because you have more market share and you can push down on them and make more demands because you're more attractive. So, that's a benefit. We could go back and forth all day long with the seesaw that is benefit and not benefit, right? But that's one of the things that you get when you're able to scale up, is you can call the agencies and try and get another 1/8 and work with your vendors and try and negotiate a lower cost to produce. Even so, it's very difficult right now for everybody.
Jeremy, what do you think is the lowest hanging fruit from a technology standpoint? And not to totally put you on the spot.
Can I add one more thing?
Oh, yeah, by all means. Go ahead.
Just one more thing, and there's another problem with scale that so Greg and I have the luxury of having scale. The problem is then that invites every single state regulator in because they know you have a capital base and deep pockets. And so like I'm hearing 7 CRMs and trying to figure out how to make that compliant in a way so that when I'm talking to the state of Arizona, I'm like, no, trust me, we got this. The regulatory impact of trying to do too many things can be absolutely detrimental to your business. So.
Yeah, right on. I mean, Rick, that's a perfect segue to like, where do you start? Because part of the implied question to what Greg and Jerry are saying is, if you're going to make a strategic move somehow here, how do you grab back that control? How do you grab back that authority? How do you cut costs if you didn't cut them already? And I think where you start is you have to pick a strategy. I actually think committing to it is more important than what it actually is. And what I mean by that is, are we addressing the operational manufacturing costs of our team members, and we're giving our team members tools to make them more effective and efficient? Or are we addressing the up funnel net new leads that we didn't have before. We got to focus on more business on the front end. And you can split that investment up. It just really makes it tough to then show a meaningful, measurable difference when you're doing a little bit here, a little bit here, and a little bit here. And so I think if it was me trying to pick, I would either try to go up funnel, or I would try to address a manufacturing pain point, a manufacturing friction point. And then I would start there and then move to the next one once I felt that had hit a success metric that I set out. So an example of these AI conversations that we heard at the gathering, there was a lot of conversation about platform focus or how you think about AI across your business. I didn't find those particularly compelling. What I found compelling was, we're going to make this group of people more effective with this tool. And then if that works, we're going to see if that tool applies to this part of the business, and if it does, this part of the business. So if I can make my underwriters more effective with a tool, what does that open up for my processors or closers? And if I can make them more effective, what does that open up for me to cut down the number of delays, redundancies, communication points? So you start with one point, you build out from there. And if you don't want to do the manufacturing piece, everybody's doing some sort of tool on the front end for chat, frequently asked questions, or incubation. Start there and try to convert more business that way. But I'm saying, don't try to understand like that I'm going to automate the entire process. I have to think about the entire process. I have to pick one spot, I have to prove it, and then go in order.
Agree with that. I think that's a solid approach. Are you ready to come run NFM for us, please?
All right.
I appreciate that.
Greg, you guys have done a fair amount of AI investments, haven't you? Don't you have some AI? What are some of the improvements you guys have made with AI?
Yeah, so we have a tool that people can find on the internet where we have our guidelines and product mix all in there and easily summoned, as well as questions like, can we do this program, or do we do, how low of a FICO do we go down to? We have a section for HR that covers benefits and things like that. We have an LOA type sidekick that you can assign things to, and then you can also summons your pipeline from this tool. So you're able to say, show me my live pipeline, or show me every consumer below 6.5% as you begin to project out once rates go down to look for opportunities. And so that's been created at NFM, and it's been helpful. It also adds a level of protection, as I understand it from our CIO, in that we don't want people putting consumer data. Apparently, everything you put in ChatGPT is public record or is stored somewhere. So
unless it's a private, unless you set up.
By having it internally, it ensures that no one's saying, hey, Mr. Jones with SOAP number, blah, 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 create this letter form, right? We're able to monitor and keep that all internal. And so, but again, I think you sprinkle in AI, you sprinkle in the up in the funnel stuff, you sprinkle in the fact that social media and influencers have such a pivotal role in where we're going here. It all sort of says to me that the loan officer of the future, the NAR settlement, like everything is getting pushed up funnel, right? And so, I think there's going to be a point where a lot of the older companies like ours that have been around, we're going to have to actually change who we are, or we're going to fall by the wayside. You're going to see these companies coming up that are bubbling up, that are able to get to the consumer earlier, that are able to control the real estate agent and all those things through social media, through AI, through technology, through some of these things that are out there now with all these various platforms on the tech side, to be able to be more predictable and intentional about getting to the borrower earlier. So I think that's where it's going. The problem is, for companies like ours that are $6 billion already, how much time, energy, focus, money, right? Well, we're losing money. We're not losing money, but we've lost a lot of money up until the last 3 quarters, but as has every IMB. How much do we want to invest in that now when we're all just trying to plug the holes on the boat and start to put ourselves back on a steady course. And so what you'll see is these new companies coming up that have this focus. If I were to start a company today, that's what I'd focus on. I'd make it I would have the funnel. I'd try and get to the consumers as early as we can, nurture them. I'd partner with people like FinLocker to be able to sort of rehabilitate those that don't qualify, because that's like a third from our data. The 70,000 leads that we brought in through our influencer division from Vieaux, a third of them are not ready. They're below 580. They have some challenge. And so those people are largely being ignored. Just imagine if you could convert, of those 33,000, you can convert 10% of them. Like, that's a company right there, right? Mm-hmm. So, not to go on a rant, AI is fine. I think it's the kind of thing where it's just going to make your company more efficient. And it's going to distinguish between who is able to rewire, what old folks like me and old companies are able to rewire their philosophy and their approach to doing mortgage. That's it. It's not going to replace anybody, man. It's just not on the mortgage side. Well, I think it's going to distinguish between the haves and the have-nots. To me, the much bigger threat, which I wrote about months ago on my LinkedIn, is overseas. That's the threat, man. That's the thing no one's looking at, because I know we've got 50 people or so overseas between the Philippines and India, right? Yeah. And that's at a tenth of the cost. And let me tell you, they do great work, okay? So that's one of the ways that we're pushing our costs down. But I don't know how many companies are doing that. Not all of them, right? So anyway, Jay, maybe you want to chime in on that.
Yeah,
or maybe
it's funny. We've got overseas, and you're not working. Well, no, I'm definitely overseas, and the people you're working with overseas have PhDs in finance, and they're working on your trade disclosures. I mean, it's in the work, as long as you give them the outline of how you want it done, it's done better than it can be done here. As Greg says, as less of a cost. And anybody of any substance or size, whether it's Freedom or CMG, UWM, Loan Depot, they've got a component of their operations offshore, 100%, or because there's just, and then you look at, I'm sorry, I was going to try not to get into politics, but like you said, if I could start my business today, where would I, how would I do it? It definitely wouldn't be in the state of California. Like, it's almost impossible to do business there. Just cost associated with HR benefits, et cetera. But yeah, offshore, I wouldn't call it a threat, because you're never going to be able to move the front facing, in my view, and I'm stubborn and old. I'm not going to move my front facing experience offshore. It's not going to happen. But a lot of this back office stuff, back and forth with the agencies, QC, some of the underwriting disclosure stuff that a consumer doesn't see should probably belongs over there. So,
yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we're going to build a mortgage company overseas. I'm just saying the main point of what I was making is there's all this talk about AI is going to replace all the administrative people in mortgage. No, it's not. That's not what's going to replace.
Oh no.
That. What's going to replace them, if anything, is cheaper wage.
I think the thing that technology does well.
AI is great, Greg. Like you said, like what you're doing, we're doing. Like, sorry, I've got a lag, and I'm so sorry. I'm usually more put together than this, but I'm sitting with bad internet right now. My apologies. But AI, it has to be a repeatable process. Like, so you have to have things right now the AI is such that it's got to be a repeatable process, and the loans we do are not repeatable. Like, every loan is so different. And that's the struggle there, and that's why you need these front end people over here. But some of the things like guidelines and developing product, that's all AI work. So,
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say to that point. And Greg, what you were saying is it's the connective tissue. What we're talking about is the connective tissue to make it all work between the people where you have the savings or where you've implemented these solutions. And I think one of the things that you've asked a lot of innovative challenge questions when we talk, and I think one for today that I keep thinking about is we talk about moving everything up, We talk about giving visibility and tools and other things to people, mortgage loan officers, real estate agents, and consumers. There's a ton more information that's easily accessible, weaving all these people together and keeping all these people connected. So then the question becomes, who does the consumer trust when? And that will determine the up funnel strategy that you have. And you're saying, if I can get consumers trusting the advice that we provide on social media or on in our relationships, however we get to them the earliest, there's always going to be a tension from this point forward between the real estate agent and the mortgage loan officer looking to get that trust earlier and earlier. And who wins that determines your strategy.
I can tell you, let me chime in on how you win that, because that's such a fabulous point, and something that I've been thinking about a lot is how ridiculous is it that as a mortgage company, us included, and I think every mortgage company, but maybe Jay doesn't do this, we don't even identify who is entering our CRM. What I mean by that is, should we be talking to the 25-year-old first-time homebuyer the way that we are communicating with the 55-year-old second home buyer that's already bought 10 homes? No, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't. But we're so damn busy that we're not, the way the world should work in the future. Again, if I started my own company tomorrow, believe you me, my CRM would see exactly how old they were. I'd do an intake, and then I would start speaking to them in a language where they're able to trust me, and they know that I know who they are. And I can identify, we are built for a 24-year-old first-time home buyer, a 28-year-old first-time home buyer, a self-employed buyer versus someone that's buying a second home that's on their 15th property. Like, our CRMs, should be able to identify that. And that talks about what you're talking about. How do you connect with the consumer to earn their trust? Is there a better way, if we take an app on a 24-year-old who's never bought a home, to identify with them than to start dripping on them with stuff we know is important to them? Like, what are we doing in the community? That's super important. Are we looking out for the environment? That's super important. Things like that, right? But we don't do that. We just take a big CRM, we drop it right in, and everybody gets the same stuff.
Oh, the same templates. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's I'm excited to hear you say that, Greg. That's a lot of, and that's like a game that will never be done, right? You can always get better at it, but that's where we're investing a ton of our product time, is helping our lending partners do that, because we're able to cut across the lending information from the lender's CRM, POS that they share with us, plus the real estate information all throughout the transaction from the realtor, or if the transaction hasn't started yet, just with MLS and market data. And so that's been our only real serious AI play, is putting a layer of generative AI across. Okay, this is what we know about your lending transaction. This is what we know about your home buying search. You saved searches like this. You're working with this realtor. We're putting all that, layered into generating what we think your journey is going to look like, how long we think it's going to take, what down payment assistance programs might exist there, or whatever. We'll layer in more and more over time, but that's the exact game that we're starting to play. So I'm excited to hear you.
That's great. I'm excited to hear you say that. I wasn't aware of that. So I think Mike just chimed in with a question asking, don't CRMs already have this?
There's one more point to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jay.
Nope. No, the CRMs do not. They are not smart enough to do that, and I've looked at all of them. But I want to add to Greg's point. Not only should my CRM do this, I love Greg's rant on CRM on LinkedIn. It was just classic, and it was like I wanted to copy and paste that and send it to every single vendor I had. But anyways, it's not only what does the CRM look like. What does this loan officer look like 3 to 5 years from now? When you're looking at this Zoomer generation, like everybody's like, well, it's really hard to train a new loan officer, but we've done some of that with like new loan officers that are 24, 25 years old, and they're a little bit dumb and naive, and they show up and 90 days later they have like 6 loans in their pipeline. Why? Because they don't have any of the bad behavior, bad prospecting skills that somebody that's been doing this for 20 years have. So like, we need a new set of loan officer in our ranks as well. by the way, that is smarter than anybody on this call. They are way beyond any kind of technological skill that any of us have, and figure out a way to bring these people in back to influencing their generation. And on top of that, have a CRM that actually is going to work. And back to, like, what does the sales funnel look like? This millennial Zoomer generation is way bigger than the baby boomer generation. And the baby boomer generation fed the industry for the last 30 years. So that's,
and by the way,
part I want to get to
Jay,
as well. So
Jay, I think that's such a key point here, because this is where people get really hung up on, how do I address diversity? How do I address generational issues? How do I address community issues in underserved communities? And it's really good business to have people who know and have lived the experience talking to people who know and have lived that experience.
Yeah.
So we act sometimes like you have to do some special program that's outside your core business to treat your customers right and to treat these people right. And it's inside of your core business. The way that you win is by driving this new person that you're talking about towards the community they already know and love and that they're a part of. And you match your business to the underserved communities and to the customer who looks like them, talks like them, cares about the same things that Greg was talking about earlier. What am I doing in the community? How does this affect the environment? What does the new American dream look like? What do I need to think about to make generational wealth for my community? Let's match it up. Like, this can be part of your core business strategy and doesn't have to be this separate thing.
That's such a good point, Jeremy. You know, on the AI piece of it, it's interesting. I was in Vermont and I was playing with ChatGPT 4.0 with a friend of mine, and he got a text message from his wife, and he was like, well, "How do I respond to my wife?" And I said, "Well, let's just type in the scenario and to see what ChatGPT says." And part of what we did is I actually, and he's married to an African American woman who's from Vermont, who was educated in Boston. We added all these attributes about his wife into the system, and it was fascinating to see what the response was, because the response was actually in not just the answer that was being delivered, but the nuances and the references to like Vermont related references. It was kind of hilarious how the actual answer was specific to the person that we had described to ChatGPT. And in some ways, I think that does add like a third dimension. Like Greg was saying, all the CRMs are very linear, but our approach to the business is very linear, as if every consumer has the same need, right? But now we add aspects of, of whether it's gender and the considerations around gender, the socioeconomic sort of considerations to that consumer, the experience that the consumer has with our organization is going to be a lot more intimate. So I do think technology, I do think, like you said, the connected tissue, I think, around the way AI is going to sort of pull this together is going to be really what's the most groundbreaking.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Can we pivot to like the hot news? Can we get into like some controversial stuff here?
Yeah, what's up?
Well, let's talk about that lawsuit, against the New Jersey loan officer for a moment. We don't have to go into any detail or name any company, but
on
go
that,
ahead, Jay.
On that note, I have to actually step off. So I have kids I'm on vacation today. My kids are beating on the door saying, "Daddy, it's time to come out."
Oh man, you're jumping out.
And I'll give you my 2 cents on.
All right. Hey Jay, before you go, I'm going to post
this lawsuit. Everybody
Jay.
On this call called this thing. I'm sorry, you cut out, Greg. I didn't hear you say it again.
Well, I just had a quick question before you go. I mean, the question I was going to pose was, this gentleman. All right. Anyway,
go ahead.
Reportedly, this individual who is being.
I'll give you my 2 cents. Three years ago, when all this happened, and we saw this new company sign up with somebody that was another company, everybody knew what was going on there. It wasn't a big secret, and now all of a sudden it's out in the news. So I've got many thoughts on that. Rick, invite me next Friday and we can talk in depth on that.
Let's go.
I gotta go. See you guys.
So Greg, I didn't really quite get what Jay was saying on that last point, because
I mean, the question is, the individual that was, that's being charged. And again, I'm going to keep this high level and I'm not going to get into names and who and where they went and all that, but big producer who, went to another big IMB, I don't know, 8 months ago or so, and got paid a big signing bonus to go there. Like, it's not a secret. The signing bonus the game is going on everywhere. Right. So the question is, do IMBs need to start looking at things a little bit differently? Like it was when it comes to the calculus around paying signing bonuses and paying, how much you decide to pay, like all of a sudden now, does it make me think, big producer in a market like this, how are they even closing 29 loans in April or whatever the number was? Like, there's actually an extra risk to more loans, especially in an environment like this where people are cutting corners. The question is this instance going to push down the signing bonuses and make CEOs think a little bit differently about how they play that game? That's the question.
Yeah. My response is I don't think it'll change the calculus around the amount of money or sort of the formula for money to attract top producers. Just like in any professional sport, you need money to attract the A-listers, right? But I do think agreements are going to change. I don't know of any advance or bonus that actually has any reference to subsequent litigation or fraud or trailing liabilities prior to going to so let's say going forward with this company in a manner where monies would be recaptured or monies would be or withheld in light of any past revelation.
That's not really about is the company that he went to responsible for the past transgressions. It is, what has this person done in the past that might affect the check that I just wrote them? Because
that's my point.
All that money's gone now. He's not getting that money back.
Well, yeah, no. It depends on how it's structured. And
I hear you, but yeah, right, correct. Yeah, so it's probably staggered or whatever, but there's a sum of money.
Yeah.
In addition to additional scrutiny, which will come out of whatever happened in the past. Now all of a sudden, this follows you if you're someone not doing the right things, and obviously innocent until proven guilty. Please understand I'm saying that. I'm just talking psychologically about the moment we're in and the behavior of companies when it comes to how they look at acquiring people. And will this change? Does this allegation change the game? I think for us, it's going to make us look a little more closely and probably build in some risk that, you're bigger now. What have you done in your past?
It's a bit of a stretch. This is a bit of a stretch, Greg, but I think that's my role here on this show. My wife was asking me last night about the NFL draft, and she was like, how come it's a draft? How come they don't just sign with the top bidder? How come it's not a bidding war for the college players and everybody has a shot to sign Caleb Williams for whatever? Why is it set up this way? And I was like, I honestly think it's because the owners don't trust each other, because they know all of they want kind of an opportunity to not just have the smaller fish get devoured by the same team that's just going to pour all the money and pay the highest guy every single year. So they actually structure the draft, not necessarily because it's best for the player, but because it's best for the owners to not outbid each other, because they know they don't have self-discipline around just constantly running up the price. So kind of what you're saying a little bit is we have this issue with signing bonuses that isn't that different. All these other CEOs are like, well, somebody's going to do it, so I'll do it. And they rationalize themselves into a check that you're saying is increasingly irrational.
Or
Because
riskier,
of all-
or now possibly riskier.
Yeah, possibly riskier. It's flipped.
Like we looked at a producer doing 100 million, and man, look at the multiple we're going to pay on that because they're in the top 1%, right? But what we haven't been thinking about, which now you have to think about as well, what are those loans like? Like how closely to that lender that they just left look at those loans? And another question that we should be asking is, how in the world does something like that even happen? Like checks and balances. How closely are lenders looking at the loans that their LOs are doing? There's so many questions that we could talk about here. That's some meaty stuff, Rick.
Well, I think that the recruiting data, and you know, you and Greg and Rick have, you know, infinitely more purview into LO hiring than I've ever had. But the data component of it has been super interesting to me. I'm an advisor for Ingenious Data, Jeff Walton, and those guys, and so I've seen them as they've developed different pieces, and it looks like it's really close to being able to basically flag people doing things like this, because you can see all the details of all the loans of any LO over time as they move companies, as they move realtors that they work with on purchase. You know, there's just so many different tags or whatever you want to consider it on a loan and on a loan officer now. I wonder if it's getting close to a point where you could like forecast risk on that LO or something like that.
Good question. I don't know that it's ever, I don't know. I mean, it's just because someone's doing 60% investor properties. I mean, that could raise their risk profile. Certainly you could that could do that, but you're not going to be able to know who's speeding and who's following the rules unless you dive into the files.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to think through if technology could help you, though, when you do onboard a new producer, how you spend the first 90 days or whatever it is using technology to evaluate the comparison to the rest of your team. So we heard a lot at the conference about, well, I'm looking for people who match this or that. And I'm empowering those people with technology because I believe people and technology combined is the magic, is the secret sauce. And that's kind of a lot of what we've been saying here, Greg. So how do you put technology around your new hire process so I know within the 90 days, and maybe you compel compensation, signing bonuses or just regular comp, and you associate the two. So you're like, now I've got a framework and I can see what's happening. And now I use technology for what it's good at: pattern recognition, guardrails, flagging things for other people to take a look at, like the experts within your organization.
I'll go a step further. I wish there was a way to make it so when you give out signing bonuses, everybody just agrees nobody gets $1 until 90 days is over, right? Because I mean, can you imagine how many times a lender has written a check and LO isn't who they thought they'd be, or they're, you know, it just so happens that the 80 million you paid them on, 60% of that or 80% of it was given to them in leads, and you didn't know that at the time because you weren't able to see that. Like, I know of an example of a guy we lost to it. Again, I'm not mentioning names here, but he did, his MMI showed 80 million. Well, he only did 22 million of that on his own. The rest was builder business where he was handed leads. But the lender didn't know that. So they wrote a $750,000 check. And believe you me, they regretted it. So, and conversely for LOs, they should have the benefit of being able to look under the hood just in case they made a mistake themselves. The problem is once the money starts rolling in, and okay, you're going to get this 120,000 on your first paycheck. We take the taxes out. It just, you know, it becomes a mountain for them to try and get out from under, because now you have to return the whole amount if you decide to leave, right? And so where are you going to come up with the difference? All of a sudden now you only got, of the 120 grand you only got 72,000 of it, or 70,000. Now you got to write a check for that plus 50 grand just to overcome a mistake. Rick is very quiet. I'm wondering what he's doing. He seems to be asking here. I'm not quite certain what he's doing over there. Maybe this is a subject he doesn't want to touch. I don't know.
No, look, I think, look, I wanted you to have sort of the floor on that, you know, to be honest with you, because I think that your experience in this is worthwhile. And my thoughts on the subject is it's really difficult because sometimes people negotiate stupid deals. And sometimes, you know, it comes out at, you know, you come out ahead on it, and other times you lose, you know, and I think that I don't think there's necessarily a way to automate that. I do think with just access to data, I just don't know. I think just additional layers of questioning. I mean, having negotiated hundreds of loan officers in their comp plans, sometimes you don't ask that one extra question you should ask, like the source of the deal. Because sometimes like how they speak, when you're talking to a top producer, like, like there's kind of like a fluid aspect. They know their numbers, they know their comp, they know exactly, they really seem to be on top of it. And there's some people who, say that they do good volume, but there's just something off about it. Like they just don't know their numbers, or they just really don't speak to the process in the way that somebody should if they're doing that kind of volume. So I'm surprised that flags didn't come up in that way, or just online, just doing some kind of a search. If someone's got a relationship with a builder, it's like, gosh, it's kind of, unless they just lied and said, look, I'm not getting any of my loans, I'm just self-sourcing it through realtors, and they just happen to be from builders or an MSA, that you just happen to be an in-house MSA.
Well, look, it's even worse.
I mean,
it's even worse.
It seems like a really dumb, or really just poor judgment was used in hiring this individual more than anything else. It just doesn't seem, that's a very rare mistake. I don't know too many people who make that kind of mistake, or at least shouldn't, I should say.
I just want to say thank you, Greg. Thank you, Rick. I got to drop at 1:30 here my time, but appreciate you. This is a really great conversation. So I want you to keep going. I just have to drop myself. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Have a good weekend.
Everybody's dropping, and then there were 3. I feel like we could go on for hours.
Yeah.
By the way, I can't see if anybody's watching. You do that on purpose, Rick? I mean, I know you have a huge audience. You keeping tabs on who's popping in and out?
No, of course. We have about 6,000 people right now watching us.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Good job, buddy.
And,
the biggest news of the week is that you moved from one incredible lender to another. So you got to touch on that, man, before you hang up, don't you?
Yeah, with a flair for the dramatic at that, announcing it at the conference.
Yeah, no, look,
Yeah.
Sierra Pacific has been in the business for 35 plus years, and it's a really solid. Has a solid foundation as one of the largest balance sheets in the country, and they're very smart with their money. There's no question about it. I think it's about $1 billion or so wholesale, a little over $1 billion retail. So it's about a $2.25 billion platform, and so there is that. And that's the reason why I made that comment earlier, Greg, because when you go from $1 billion to $2 billion, or $1 billion to $3 billion, that's a much, going from $1 billion to $2 billion is a pretty big step. I think 2 to 3 is a little easier, at least in my experience. But 1 to 2, getting from 0 to 1 is momentous. Like I said in one of my more famous posts, only about 146 lenders last year cleared $1 billion, that hurdle. So the rest of them are trying to get to that hurdle and they fail, right? So, but once you get to $1 billion, getting 1 to 2 is harder. But 2 to 3, I always found to be fairly easy, because everything, the machine is really working well. So we're in that stage of going to, 1 to stretch to 2 as a retail originator. And there's probably going to be deals that we're going to do what we would do that you probably wouldn't want to do, right? Because you don't have to, right? So that's the kind of Rubik's Cube that we're trying to figure out, or as I do my sort of due diligence and assessment as to what my sort of retail plan is going to be, is what kind of deals and how are we going to go about doing it? What are we going to tolerate and put up with just for the sake of growth? And I've always been a big believer in sort of, you grow and then you prune the tree. Like you do kind of, you generate the momentum to grow, and then you prune the tree as people that you probably should let go, but you kind of hang on to a little bit longer for the sake of the momentum. But then as you add more people, then you prune the tree.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, Sierra Pacific's been around as long as I can remember. So, I mean, they're lucky to have you. You're a super well-connected guy, really intelligent. You put a lot of great deals together, so I can't wait to see what you do. Just don't go near our people, please.
No, hey, I will.
He's paying big.
You're good, man. You're too good, buddy. Stay
No,
away.
dude, if anyone in this, and I do this as a courtesy for people I know and I admire. If someone were to reach out to me, I would probably, I would reach out to you in advance and say, kind of, hey, so and so, what's the scoop of so and so? They reached out. I would do that in confidence, and we would sort of manage that together.
Yeah.
But certainly,
The truth of the matter is, if people are looking, I've always taken the philosophy, Rick
yeah,
and Brock, that if people are looking around, you've already failed as an owner or as a C-suite person. There's something you didn't do right. Now there are some outliers, like maybe you have a product that you're moving to a product that you absolutely just can't do. Maybe it's construction to perm, and there are only 3 lenders that do that great. We don't do that, whatever.
yeah.
But by and large, people that are disenchanted, they've been disenchanted for a while, and you always end up at a crossroads, right? Like, do you point the finger at them and say, why are they leaving? Look at all I did for them, or do you look in the mirror and say, what could we have done better to make sure this doesn't happen again? I'm in the latter. I know you probably are too.
Well, I know I can't even email you without me getting rejected, spam filter.
Well, that's not true. Sierra Pacific's not on the spam list, so you're good. Your former employer is just too damn good at recruiting. I can't, we can't touch that. So we had to block, but everyone's got everyone's numbers in this game,
Well, good. I've always appreciated your support and your encouragement. I look forward to doing some cool things together, as well as in all of us. Let's get shirts ordered and send these out to those who want them. And
I'm working on it. The domain's been secured. The website's getting thrown up, and we're gonna work with the manufacturer to ensure that you can put a company logo on it.
Good.
Oh, cool.
All right, brother. Well, thank you, Brock. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you going the distance.
Brock, good seeing you, buddy. Hey, take care. All right.
Yeah.